Ladies and gentlemen, the Supreme Court has ruled. Hey everybody, Diane Haggerty, grassroots taxes, buckle up. This is a good one. Okay, it's not often the tax court gets taken to the Supreme Court. It's extremely rare because tax court's pretty final and pretty narrow, and usually things don't go to the Supreme Court. Well, we had a Supreme Court case that ruled on June 12, 2025, which was last Thursday when I'm filming this. That's about divorce and separate tax liability, offers and compromise. That's those things you hear on the radio that's like, oh, we're going to forgive all your taxes. They're not going to forgive all your taxes, but they'll take an offer, right? And, late filed returns and amended returns and joint tax liability and filing after you get divorced. Okay, it's got all this stuff. So buckle up. Here we go. IRS Commissioner versus Zuch. Zuch is the woman. The wife, we're going to call her wife, and the other person involved is husband, who's not party in this case, but significant, okay? So husband was married to wife. They did not file a tax return in 2010, probably because they weren't getting along. They were getting divorced, and they had to file a final joint tax return, and they filed it in 2012 in arrears. So they filed a late tax return. They owed taxes. So after the divorce, the husband decided to go for an offer in compromise, and he was granted it, which is rare and difficult. They're not a magic potion, okay? And he was granted that, and in that time, he had to pay $50,000 to the IRS. That was the offer he made, and they took the $50,000. They applied that to their joint tax liability from 2010, not the separate tax liability that she had, but the previous to the marriage one. And they said, no, it should have been like 50-50. Half should have went to my tax liability and half should have went to hers. But it's complicated. And so she went to tax court to get her half of the money back and say it was misapplied. He agreed that it was, husband agreed that it was misapplied. So, it happens. Okay, everybody was like, oh, everybody's copacetic. But the problem is the IRS already had their money. And tax court's only there for when you don't pay your taxes. If you want to pay your taxes first and then go after the government and get it back, you got to go through federal courts. Okay, the regular federal court system, not tax court. Tax court is only if you owe the money and don't want to pay and want to, settle it before you pay, right? So she went to tax court and she lost. And they said, no, we applied it to your joint tax liability. You don't get a refund. You don't get any of that money back. It went to your other taxes. And so it goes back and forth, goes all the way to the Supreme Court. You know what the Supreme Court says? You lose. Yes, she lost. Why did she lose? Because she used tax court and there was no levy involved. So if the IRS isn't after you for any money and all your taxes paid, the tax court has no jurisdiction. So you have to go through the federal court system. She went through the wrong court system. She lost. Ooh, ouchie, ouchie, ouchie. Okay, but that's just the way it works. And that was just a recent ruling. They're upholding that. The Supreme Court saying, no, if you want to do that, you got to go through a different court system. Tax court doesn't have the jurisdiction to go through a case if you don't owe them money at the time. So it's kind of a loser case. The dissenting opinion was written, and it was really good because now the IRS, can make a mistake and not be held liable for it in a case like this, which is not good, not a direction I really want to see the service going in, but it's the way they ruled, and we're just going to have to deal with it. If you ever have tax problems, you owe money to the United States government, please don't try to do it alone. Please get some help, and I'll see you at tax time.